hoping this is the right slide. Oh, good. Okay. So my colleagues have told you about what is possible now with these augmented and virtual realities. When these technologies are nascent, right? We're just getting started understanding what these things are going to do. But as you've heard, right, we really think that these technologies are going to explode in a big way. In the next 5 years, we're going to have these technologies ubiquitous. They're not going to just be affecting little bits and pieces of our lives, or just in the shop, or just in the commercial realm. No, they're going to affect every aspect of our life, right? So all of those activities that we currently do on our second screens, on our computer screens, all of those things are about to change in a very radical way through these technologies. And I don't think it's that big of a leap to imagine that that's possible, right? We're all using augmented reality every single day. How many of you use augmented reality today? 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm going to argue that every single one of us uses augmented reality. I used it multiple times today in the form of GPS. GPS is augmented reality because it's tying the virtual and the real together in a meaningful way, okay? But when I asked you if you used augmented reality, you all said no. And the reason for that is the way that this system currently works is that I look into a screen and I see the virtual information. And then I look up from my screen and I see the real. And the onus is on me as a user to make the correlation between what I'm seeing inside this box and what's happening in the real world. So all that these technologies are going to do is change that paradigm just a bit. So now that instead of looking into a screen, I'm looking through the screen, okay? And what that does is pretty magical. It changes the responsibility for the translation from me as a user to the technology. Now the technology says, okay, this virtual piece of content that I'm trying to tell you about, it's actually related to that spot right there. Not some spot in this vicinity, but that specific spot is what this is tied to, okay? And when we do that, magical things start to happen. So sure, it will help us with driving. This is a heads-up display from, I believe this one is from Toyota, okay? So you can see the turn-by-turn directions literally on the street where you're supposed to turn. But also, we can imagine how this works for industrial applications, such as fulfillment, right? So we already have heard wonderful stories about some of the augmented reality experiments happening in Amazon warehouses and numerous warehouses around the world, where instead of making the worker kind of focus on the screen and do all the work to figure out how to coordinate their steps and where those things are, these augmented reality devices can instead put that directly on the floor, scan the object and correlate that with the inventory without the worker having to do much. Okay, except for follow the steps that it's being provided. Now, that's great for industrial applications, but like I said, this is not going to just be in small vertical pieces. This is going to emanate all over the world, or all over our lives, right? So we imagine if it simplifies this high productivity, multitasking environment, it can clearly help us do shopping on our own, okay? So right now, if I want to buy an end table, okay, I am either going to a store or looking online and trying to extrapolate what will that piece look like in my house. Okay, the onus is again on the human to translate between what they're seeing and their actual reality of the environment. Okay, for example, this app from Wayfair, which is built on Google's Project Tango platform. Okay, so Project Tango is really interesting. What it does is it actually scans your environment. It gets an accurate read of spaces and dimensions of that environment. So now it understands the space that you're talking about. HoloLens also does the same thing, okay? So when I'm looking now at this Wayfair Tango app, Wayfair is a big online home retailer, okay? So I can be looking at, I need a side table for that spot right there. My Tango knows the dimensions of that spot. It can also see the decor of my space. It can start to predict what types of end tables I'm going to want and show those. And then I can take it, instead of having to think, what is this going to look like in my spot? I can just put it there and see what it looks like in my spot. Now this not only works at home, where I can bring the item to my home, but then I can also bring my home to the store. So I can be looking at some item that I see in the store, in the brick and mortar store, that I'm like, that is cool. Where can I fit this in my house, right? And so instead it flips it, and now I can look for spots that I can put that object. Okay? So that's what these technologies are going to do. They're going to change the emphasis from me having to imagine it to the technology helping me to understand it. Okay, so where is this going? Where do we see this heading? So like I said, in 5 years' time, these are going to be ubiquitous devices in some shape or form, whether it be something that's on your phone that you're looking through your phone, or it's head-mounted displays, or it's a projection. It's going to be ubiquitous. Okay, and the augmentation is going to continue. Right now, all of the big players, Google, Apple, Samsung, Sony, Microsoft, and numerous startups have huge dedicated teams working on these technologies. Okay? Those same players that I just mentioned, all of them have patents pending on contact lenses. Sony says that their contact lens will be able to record everything you see and play it back to you, right, natively in that contact lens. Okay? And we're also going to have haptics. What I mean by haptics is that I'll actually be able to feel those objects. I'll actually know what they feel like, okay? So now imagine what this does for buying trips. Okay, imagine I'm trying to make a fashion line. I need to find a fabric for a particular shirt. I could feel the fabric. Okay, this is a while off. Don't think this is happening next year. But I should be able to feel the sensation of that object or that texture. Okay, and be able to go all over the world in a couple of hours trying out all the different fabrics I want. In addition to that, we're going to have 2 trillion sensors online by the year 2020. That's Peter Diamandis' estimation. And that means that we're going to be gathering a lot of data about each and every one of us in the form of wearable devices and wearable clothing as well. So not only are we going to have these advances in augmentation, but we're also looking at a number of other technologies that are on this exponential curve. And when they meet together, they accelerate things rapidly, okay? So if AR and VR was on its own curve, I wouldn't say 5 years. I'd say more like 10. But it's not. It's also combining with machine learning, which you learned about today, right? As well as robotics. So Roomba, for example, is going to scan your environment, create a model of that space, and allow other people, right, to be able to use that. We have a number of products that are working on that kind of a thing, right? We also are going to see an acceleration in 3D printing. A lot of you are already looking into additive manufacturing processes, right? As well as artificial intelligence and better predictive models. So all of these things are going to force these technologies to really explode exponentially in a matter of years, a couple years. Okay, so, oops, sorry. All right, so what do you need to know about exponential technologies? Well, exponential technologies dematerialize, demonetize, and democratize products, services, and industries. Let's take an example, Kodak, okay? Kodak actually invented digital photography back in 1996, okay? In that year, they were valued at $28 billion. It's a big company. And when they saw this pixelated little crappy image that they created, they thought, no, we don't do this. This is not something we're going to do. We make cameras, we make chemicals, we make papers, we make high-resolution, beautiful images, and that's what people want. They don't want this crappy little pixelated image. Okay, sorry, I have to check my facts. 6 years later, in 2012, they went bankrupt because of digital photography. That same year, Facebook bought Instagram for $10 billion. Okay, that's how quickly this dematerialization is going to happen. And that's in the past, okay? And that's in one vertical. We're talking about 3 technologies that are about to merge in 4 technologies that are about to merge in some really dramatic fashion. So that change, that dematerialization is going to happen very rapidly. What do I mean by dematerialization? Okay, we live in a dematerializing world, right? early 80s is when the computer was invented. 94 is about the time where we all started everybody had, a computer as a ubiquitous, okay? And rapidly, ever since then, all of those things that we used to think of as being essentially material, physical objects, have suddenly disappeared into virtual environments. And that's when we're looking into the screen, okay? So this is just the stuff we could put into that box. Now we're not going to be looking into it. We're going to be looking through it. So it's going to be amazing, the things that we always have thought of as being necessarily physical objects that are going to now be entirely virtual. For example, goods, high-value material goods, okay? We already heard from Philippa earlier today about how this model of ownership of goods is changing, how people are willing to rent objects as opposed to own them. The Uber model, for example, of clothing and things. Now imagine these objects, these status symbols such as rings or watches, right? If I'm wearing an augmented reality glass all the time to do everything anyways, why wouldn't that be a virtual object as opposed to a real physical object? Because then, say one day I'm wearing a Rolex and the next day I'm wearing a tag watch, I can be switching out these things very rapidly, even within hours, right? Moments. Okay? So it's going to dramatically change the way we think about ownership and physical material goods. It's going to also change the way that we think about stores. Like I mentioned earlier, right? We already see the benefit of virtual fitting rooms, and it's been a bit because the technology is not quite fully baked yet. But in 2 to 5 years' time, when these things are ubiquitous, it's going to be the expected mode. And not just when I go to the store, but at home. And that's the important part about this, is that my own home can become a bespoke store. This video in the middle here is Microsoft research experiment called holoportation. And what it is basically beaming you into my space. So I feel as if you are viscerally present, as if you are physically present. And together we can interact in my real world space, okay? So now imagine that I'm trying to redesign my kitchen, okay? And I'm using a home improvement tool. So for example, Lowe's is making something like this for their Tango app, okay? So I can have a Lowe's kitchen consultant to actually show up in my home virtually, okay? Look at my aesthetic of my house, take the actual measurements for me because they always send somebody out anyways, and show me right there in my kitchen different options for the layout, for the finishes, etc. I can have a consultant come and help me dress, like as I'm looking through my closet, like, oh, I got nothing to wear. And it can mix together stuff that I have in my closet already and stuff that it recommends so that I have this own personalized shopping assistant, something that right now is something that only really wealthy buyers can get access to. We also see things changing in kind of traditional ways. So like I mentioned, it's not just going to be augmenting our vision. It's also going to augment all kinds of places in our world. So we have a number of people working on personal biome. They have sensors now in your toothbrush, in your toilet, all kinds of places to understand your nutrition. And with an AR glass, it can actually see what's available in my refrigerator. And a service like Blue Apron that sends me a farm box with recipes, it can modulate itself so that I'm actually, let's say I'm iron deficient. It can send me iron-rich foods. And then I can use a smart oven like the June oven to cook at absolute perfection. Okay? So this is another method of thinking about augmenting our reality, changing things with that virtual tie between the real and the virtual. Now, this is all before we even stop to think about what's going to happen when we're no longer creating something in 2D and trying to, like as a designer, I have an image in my head of something that I want to see in 3D, okay? I have to somehow translate that into sketches so that all of you know what the heck I'm talking about. And then somebody has to put it into some CAD program so that we can make it, right? But now with things like Tilt Brush, where I can actually natively design in 3D space, or like this project here from Autodesk on HoloLens, I can design in native 3D, which will dramatically change what we think about when we create. The future is going to be very different than we see today in some very surprising ways. I'm very excited about it, and I can't wait to see what you guys do with it. Thank you.